Tonight we're studying Matthew 11. And this is, the way they titled it, is Not the Messiah They Expected Him to Be. We're going to start with John 1 through 3. And it came to pass, when Jesus had made an end of commanding his 12 disciples, he departed thence to teach and to preach in their cities. Now when John had heard in the prison the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples, and said unto him, Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? So this is this chapter is, you can see it's kind of chunked up into 3 or 4, maybe more stories put together. Each one of these are a little different, but it's adding to, and this is where you kind of see a little bit how Matthew thinks as he put these together. Because here again, he's trying to do as chronologically as best he can, but some of them aren't. Some of them are real close to what's in Luke, okay? Similar scriptures. But at this one, he'd sent out the 12, remember, and then he had commanded them, and it came to pass when Jesus made an end of commanding his 12 disciples. And basically what that means, the 12 disciples came back to him. He departed, he was telling them to go, and then he went out. And he also went to preach. And it says, John, who had been in prison at that particular time, he'd already been ticked off Herod, and he had been imprisoned in his for marrying his brother's wife, Herodias. And he was in prison, had been there a long time, so a relatively long time, because we'd seen all the way back where he baptized Jesus, he was fairly certain what was going on. But now it's been a long time, relatively long time, and he's been in prison and maybe getting a little discouraged. So he sent a couple of his disciples, and they said it could have been 2 ways. John was still firm in his knowing he was the Messiah, and he was just wanting to get his disciples to understand that. Or he was just also getting a little downtrodden himself. Being in prison kind of does that to you, because their prison's not like our prison. They didn't have to do nice to you, be all that. This was Herod. We kind of said the story. Herod had his, actually it was in the dungeons of the fortress that is on Machaerus, the fortress of Machaerus. His father had built a fortress on top of this mountain. It's a lot like Masada or Herodium, where Herod had built some stuff. This one's actually on the west side of the Dead Sea. So it's over in Jordan, just over in Jordan today, where it'd be. But it's on a mountaintop, and he built this fortress for himself, and this is where he was at this particular time. And later on, we think, from Josephus telling us this, that's where John the Baptist was beheaded, like a little later on. So,
do you think Jesus was a common name back then?
Yes.
And here John's in prison, and they didn't have a lot of pictures and posters.
Right.
He was just, maybe, again, here we go, because it doesn't really, maybe he was just making sure if he's doing the works that I know he is Christ. Okay?
Right, right. And that's where Jesus was wanting to reassure him that is, and that's what will come up here in just a minute. It said, it is possible that John made a mistaken distinction between the coming one and the Christ, the Messiah. There are some indications some Jews of that time distinguished between a prophet to come, promised by Moses, and the Messiah. The dominant note here is one of confusion. John's long trial in prison had confused him. So this is just some extraordinary background that some people at that particular time thought that there was going to be another Messiah or a prophet coming before the coming one, or the Messiah was going to come. So that may have been why he was, asking for that also.
You know, all of us like a little reassurance.
We do. I mean,
especially when you get ready to get your head chopped off.
When you're outside of time, like the Father and the Son is, it's when that time's going on. To us, time is a funny measurement too, because some things that you look forward to seems like they never get. And then some things that it's like, gosh, I've already been retired 2 years. It just seems like a little while ago I retired. I was working with those guys and everything. And I know physically time's moving the same, sun's moving the same and everything, but it just seems like certain things happen quicker than other things. And it's things you want, you're anticipating, seems not like you're never going to get there. Just like when you was a kid, you want to, be able to get your driver's license or whatever, get out of the house. One of the things Daniel always told us when he was young, probably 13 or 14, we was contemplating maybe, getting adopting a child or so. And Darla asked him, "You be okay with that?" 2 years, I'm out of here anyway. He was just like 15 or 16. And kids think of that way, and that's just one of the things that, that's the way he was seeing it in his eyes. I'm going to be out of here. Oh, well, that didn't happen. Anyway, Brother Epson, you'll read 4 through 6 for us.
Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and show John again those things which you do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me.
Okay. So he's trying to reassure them the way. Now, we do know that a lot of the majority of the Jewish people at that time thought the Messiah was going to be a conquering Messiah. And that was probably what John was seeing. He saw the miracles happening. He saw the dove come down, light upon him, and all that. Everything's reassuring. But then some time went by, and John's out there. I mean, he's the one. He's preaching it and everything, and stood up to Herod. And he got thrown in jail, and he's thinking, "Wow, Jesus will come and he's going to do away with all these guys, the Romans and all the hierarchy." So that may have been part of it too, that they're expecting a conquering king, and he goes back and he tells them, look and see in Isaiah what Isaiah said was going to happen. And he said, the blind's receiving their their eyesight, the lame's walking, the lepers are healed, the deaf hear, and the dead are raised. He's telling the disciples, go look back and see what Isaiah said of me. And that's what it said. Now, a lot of people go to Zechariah. Zechariah says he's going to come in with a army, basically. Judah, all of the Israel's going to be cornered and captured at the last minute. The Messiah's going to come back. Well, that's a different time. That wasn't then. That's not even now. That's going to come in the future for us, even. So they wasn't getting that.
Wonder how many, because it says the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, and then the deaf hear, and the dead are, the Gospels record just, like 1 or 2 instances, but it somewhere? He says that everything that Jesus did wasn't written because it would take volumes of book.
Yeah, in the end of John, that's what he said. I couldn't hold, the volumes couldn't be held. Another part here in Matthew, I believe it was earlier that we read, he said, everybody that came to him, he healed. And so we don't know how many people was touched, how many lives were changed. One of the things that gets people excited, because they start seeing those dead people raised up, all these things, and more people come. But then when it's not the Messiah they're looking for, that's later on in his ministry, they start to fade away, because they want more than just the miracle. They want their homeland, basically. And that's not what Jesus was there to do, especially when he got hung on the tree. They but the people, and that's why he stayed his disciples and worked on his disciples so hard to stay with him till the end. And then he told them, you're going to be empowered afterwards, after he raised up. He said, go back and continue in the upper room for a while. He didn't say the upper room, but wait for the Holy Spirit, basically. He had to leave. The Holy Spirit couldn't come. So, one of the questions they said, it might be, Jesus, why aren't you doing more? And Jesus kind of gets maybe a little upset. Look, more? I'm doing it. I'm healing everybody that comes to me. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And I think that's what they were expecting, like I said, to do more than just the healings. They was expecting more, to start rebuking the Romans and start getting people together so they can start that. Spurgeon here at the bottom, the middle of page 3 says, blessed is he who can be left in prison, can be silenced in his testimony, can seem to be deserted of his Lord, and yet can shut out every doubt. John speedily regained this blessedness and fully recovered his serenity. So, as John saw that, and then they went back to talk to John and tell him what he did, that reaffirmed in John's mind what was happening. And it set his, and I think another thing, John kind of knew what was going to happen. So he's telling his disciples, go to Jesus, just like Andrew did, was following John, now he's following Jesus. He was pointing the way, and that's what he tried to say at the very end. He's the leader. He's trying to show them this is the way that you need to go, but I'm ultimately not the one. It's going to be Jesus is the one. Okay? Bertha, on page 3, you want to read 7 through 15 for us?
As they departed, Jesus began to say unto the multitudes concerning John, what went you out into the wilderness to see, and a reed shaken with the wind? But what went ye out for to see? A man clothed in soft raiment. Behold, they that wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. But what went ye out to see? A prophet? Yea, I say unto you, and more than a prophet. For this is he of whom is written, behold, I send my messenger before thy face, which shall prepare thy way before thee. Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of woman, there has tasted not risen a greater than John the Baptist. Notwithstanding, he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied unto John. And if you will receive it, this is Elias, which was for to come. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear.
Okay. So Jesus was trying to remind the people now, okay? Not John's I mean, he was telling John's prophets too, or John's followers, but the people who John was. Who were you looking for? You know, this is the one that came out. He was a prophet, for this is he of whom it was written, behold, I send my messenger before thy face. So some people, even John's disciples, probably had questions. That's why they were sent. But he's trying to reaffirm John's stand, that he was the prophet. He was leading about that. And Jesus even told them that, you know, those that are born among women, there's no one greater than John the Baptist. It's as though some might put John in a bad light because of seeming doubts regarding Jesus. Jesus himself spoke highly of John. He often bore witness to Jesus. Now Jesus bears witness of John, so it goes back and forth. John was steady. He wasn't shaken easily like a reed. He was sober. He lived in a disciplined life, not in love and luxuries and comforts of this world. John was a servant, which was a prophet of God. He was sent as the special messenger of the Lord. John was special in that he could be considered the greatest under the old covenant. And John was second to even the least in the kingdom under the new covenant. You know, John wasn't who they were looking for sure, because he was a mangy old character, you know, in a leather, hairy suit, eating locusts and honey and living in the wild. He wasn't your, you know, nice, respectable, especially for the Pharisees, somebody that they want to follow. But whoever is the least in the kingdom is greater than he. That's what he's trying to show them. John's done all this stuff, but the kingdom is so much more. And the kingdom that's going to be coming, that's what he's telling them, this new covenant, they're going to be lots greater than John. Now, the one thing that kind of gives people cause to stop there says the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. Kingdoms will never be received passively. It's always founded on God's work on our behalf. But God's work will always produce a response in us. They are not lazy wishes or cold endeavors that bring men to heaven. It's this next paragraph, let's get now part of it. It says, I've been a Sunday school teacher for years, says one, and I've never seen any of my girls or boys converted. No, and the reason most likely is you've never been violent about it. You know, that word violent, we think like beating up. No, you have to be enthused about it. You have to be really wanting to do it and keep on doing it. So many times you may do something just like a pastor or any missionary or anything. You may not see anything come about in your lifetime. But we see so many times after that, the people that were touched by that, it just grows exponentially.
I read the article about, I think it was Spurgeon. It wasn't with the older, you know, in the 19th century, 20th century. But he said sometimes he'd roll up his sleeves when he'd get in the pulpit like he was ready to go
to battle.
Go to battle.
One of the questions is, you know, they're asking if Elijah would come. He said Elijah did in fact come during Jesus' ministry, is during the Transfiguration. But in further fulfillment of Malachi's promise, Elijah will come again before the second coming of Jesus, not the rapture, but the second coming, likely as one of the two prophets. If John the Baptist's ministry was like that of Elijah, we remember that Elijah became depressed and discouraged also. He went to a cave and, oh, poor pitiful me, I'm up here and so many people after me and all that.
Preaching's hard work. I know if you, because it's it's a prophet, a preacher, a disciple. The message that we have is a message of life and death.
Mhm.
And sometimes if we don't see results, I remember when I went to Mexico and to help for a week down there, we helped build a church. And very primitive. We mixed mud on the ground. I mean, carried it up in 5-gallon buckets, poured it in it. But when you left there, you felt like I've accomplished something.
Mhm.
And I know that there's times when I know one time many years ago, I hadn't been preaching very long, and I went to Shawnee to preach, and I preached on sanctification that night, and I thought, man, that went out just about past into the pulpit there. And then later, Sister Betty Mom was a pastor there then. She told me that one of their people later on had got sanctified, and she was talking about the way he put it, And it's easy, I mean, not easy, but you do get discouraged sometimes. And it's like anything we do sometimes. Like we go to work on a job and do our best and never get a raise, after a while it sort of.
Yeah, I was working on my lawnmower. I think I told you the story earlier, but timing belt broke on the thing. And I fixed that before, no problem. So I put a new timing belt on it, $70 or $80, something like that. But I wasn't as diligent about following the directions on it that I was before, because I'd done it before, and I thought, well, and I was tightening it up, and I probably tightened it a little too tight. Well, that was part of it, but then also I didn't put it back together right. I found out later. So one of the little idler wheels wasn't idling. So that belt was, I turned it on, flipped the thing on, and it was smoking after about 5 seconds. Underneath, rubber just smelled. So I flipped it off. I knew, okay, great, I messed something up. So I took it all apart again. Did it, put it on there. I was in the back, a little dog pen, turned it on, worked. I went about 5 feet, heard it cutting and everything. Okay, it's good. I just so discouraged. Then I said, I'm calling P&K. Come pick his up. I don't know what I'm doing. I tried it, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. And I was just like, I give up. I was so tired, so hot after all that. Didn't want to do anything else. We can get that way if we don't, stop and think about it. Verse 16 through 19, you want to read that for us? Janet, you want to read that? Page 6, 16 through 19.
Okay, but whereunto shall I liken this generation? It is like unto children sitting in the markets and calling unto their fellows, and saying, We have piped unto you, and you have not danced. We have mourned unto you, and you have not lamented. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, He hath the devil. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, Behold, a man gluttonous and a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. But wisdom is justified of her children.
So this is a little kind of difficult to understand. What's happening is this first part, 16 through 18, is they said a game that the children would play. And it's like you got half of the children over here playing one game, and the other half of the children playing over here another game. And to us, it may seem real simple now, but you got to remember, this was a simpler time. What did you play when you was kids? You didn't have Nintendos or whatever, all watch television or all this stuff. What they were playing was a game where on one side, they wanted to play this game as get married type deal. So they'd have their pipes and their flutes, and they were, doing everything, calling out. And they said, we're doing this, and you guys aren't dancing. He said, that's not the game we're playing. We're playing the funeral game. The funeral is where we need somebody mourning and lamenting and all this stuff and acting this out. So the two sides was what he's saying is, John and the people were looking for one thing, and they're both looking for the wrong things. They're not working together, okay, in what they're wanting from the Messiah. He said John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he had the devil. Okay, John didn't drink any wine. Remember, you go back to the story of the very first beginning. He wasn't going to have any wine. He was a Nazarite. He lived out in the wild and everything, but they said he had the devil because they didn't fit. He didn't fit. John didn't fit their patterns. Then the Son of Man comes, okay, and he's eating and drinking like they saw last time. He got Matthew, and he was back in there with Matthew's house with the other tax collectors and all the stuff, and they're throwing stones at him for that. And he said he's eating and drinking. They say, behold, a man gluttonous, a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. But wisdom is justified of her children. They need to both understand what they're saying. They're not working together. John's doing one thing, and they're calling him something that he's not. And then the Son of Man's over here, and he's doing things. And, you got to remember, they was at a wedding, and he created the water, the wine from the water, and at weddings at that particular time, they're dancing. There's things going on. So, the Messiah that they were looking for just wasn't fitting what was happening. And I want to tell you a little story interesting I found out this week that is different. We know the marriage in Israel is quite a bit different than what it is today. Even way back then, it's different then. But even in Galilee, the northern part where Jesus was from, the particular wedding service is a little different. And the difference is that once they, just like if you take, for example, Mary, when Mary was betrothed, okay, they'd go down and negotiate a price, and have a bride's price, he'd pay that, Joseph would pay that, and then he'd go back home, and then he'd wait. And that's what Jesus is doing, and this is the end time too. He's dealing with end time. And the groom has to wait until the father tells him, hey, you need to go get your bride. The groom doesn't know. He doesn't know what it's going to happen. But the father does. And that's what's going to happen here, talking about the wedding. That just, to me, that just like, wow. That's why it says that we need to watch carefully and be afraid. That's just a little extra. Let's see, Harold, 20 through 24.
Then began he to upbraid the cities wherein most of his mighty works were done, because they repented not. Woe unto thee, Chorazin, woe unto thee, Bethesda, for if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the day of judgment than for you. And thou, Capernaum, which art exalted unto heaven, shalt be brought down to hell. For if the mighty works which have been done in thee had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. But I say unto you, that it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for thee.
Okay. So now we kind of shift gears a little bit. Okay, different story. That other one had a couple of different pieces of the story, but now we got to a different place. And I'm not sure if the disciples had come back okay, and we're telling their stories maybe and what was going on. But here he's telling them, Jesus, he began to upbraid the cities or chastise them, okay, for what they had done because they had not repented. And he goes, these Chorazin and Bethsaida are cities. And that's the two cities that they had visited. Now, Jesus went and visited cities too, okay? And he went up to Capernaum, where he was from. He was going around through that area. It talks about it here a little bit. But they, Tyre and Sidon, we have to go back and look at that a little bit. But that was said that they would be repented in ashes a long time ago if they had known what was happening. It says God's fulfillment was fulfilled against these cities. Each one of them was just destroyed a long time ago and has been desolate for generations. Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum. We don't read in the Gospels of the great works Jesus did in Chorazin or Bethsaida, but we are told something in John 21:25. And there are also many things other that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written, which is talking about earlier. What Jesus did in Chorazin and Bethsaida are among those unwritten works. We really don't know what happened. And this is a good reminder that the Gospels are a true account of Jesus' life, but he didn't include everything that happened in the Gospels. Capernaum was his own city, the headquarters of the army of salvation, and many had seen him and heard Son of God. Therefore he mourned to see Capernaum remain as hardened as ever. Capernaum wasn't getting saved, the people in Capernaum. Not like some of the other places he'd been to. These cities didn't attack Jesus, they just did not drive him from their gates. They did not seek to crucify him, they simply disregarded him. Neglect can kill just as much as persecution can. If we allow that in our lives, if we just, you call it neglect or just not wanting to do, perseverance, not want to persevere through something, we are a lot of times caught up in that. Because, just like in John's case, he was in a situation he couldn't change right then. So, he needed something to help him, and that's why his disciples went out, and he came back and got him a little bit of encouragement. But here, Jesus was chastising these cities because they weren't listening. And that's one of the things later on we'll see in his message. They tried to go to the Jews first. And then later on, Jesus tells them, the disciples, after they go out and he returns, to the earth again, and tells them, go out to all the different nations. Let's see. At that time, Jesus answered and said, I thank thee, O Father, the Lord of heaven and earth, because thou hast hid these things from the wise and prudent, and hast revealed them unto babes. Even so, Father, for so it seemeth good in thy sight. All things are delivered unto me of my Father, and no man knoweth the Son but the Father. Neither knoweth any man the Father save the Son, and he to whomsoever the Father and the Son will reveal to him. Says, with a strong sense of joy in Jesus' communication to his Father, the persons of the Trinity speak and communicate with each other. The word answered is suggestive, revealing the perpetual fact of communion existing between Christ and God. The note of praise was in response of Christ's heart to the secret of Jehovah. That you've hidden these things from the wise and the prudent. Jesus was happy that God had chosen the unlikely, seen by the world as babes, to respond to his message of the kingdom. this should be seen in the larger context of the rising rejection of Jesus and his messengers, starting back a couple of chapters ago in chapter 9. At first, they were listening to it because he's doing the miracles. Then he starts feeding them a little bit more, and they start rejecting him. There is an important difference in the way that the Son knows the Father and the way we know him. We know God the Father because he stoops low to make himself known. God the Son knows God the Father because they are equal in nature, completely compatible with one another. So that's why, to me, it's so difficult to understand or difficult to comprehend the Trinity in my mind. It's just, I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, I know it is, and I'm not saying it's just, to me, it's hard to understand how that happens. Okay, we go on to the next part of it.
Just come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
It's kind of shifting gears a little bit again to a different subject. And he's telling them, although it goes back to the others too, he's chastising those cities, but he's telling them, if they will just come unto me with their problems, with the issues that they have. It says, I will give you rest. It talks about the yoke, the cattle that they had at the time, the oxen. They said a lot of times what they would do, they would have an older oxen with a newer oxen. So the old oxen knew what was going on, and he would do a lot of the pulling and stuff until the newer oxen got used to it. And also the yoke had to be so that it didn't hurt the oxen. If it was burdensome to the oxen, then he wouldn't be pulling as well as he should, and it may be pulling to one side if it hurts one or the other. In all these, he tells us, come unto me, all ye. Jesus himself, to Jesus himself, we must come by a personal trust, not to doctrine, not to ordinance or ministry, are we to come first, but to the personal Savior of Jesus. Jesus directed his call to those who were burdened. He called those who sensed they must come to him and relieve their need instead of living in self-sufficiency. So many times that's what we try to do. Peter tried to do that. He tried to take care of business himself. Many times we do that in our own lives. We try to fix things. We try to take care of it when we just need to lay it off onto God. Let him take that burden and let him show us what to do. That's hard to do, isn't it? I heard a minister talking about Brother Queener just last night. He said he was out mowing his grass, and his neighbor stopped and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm mowing my grass and I'm getting ready to go on a missionary trip." And he said, "Missionary trip? Where are you going?" He said, "Well, the Lord said to go over here." He said, "Well, won't you go get ready?" He said, "When you going?" He said, "Well, right after I finish mowing grass." He said, "Well, why don't you go get your stuff ready and I'll finish mowing grass." So he finished that. And he goes, "You ready to go to the airport?" He said, "Yeah." So we took him to the airport. He said, "You got your tickets and everything?" "No." He said, "Why?" He said, "Well, the Lord's going to provide." So he got up there and the guy said, I don't believe this. And he got to the counter and he said, "I want to go on a trip." She goes, "Oh, that's not possible." He said, "This plane's full going to wherever it was. There's no way that you're going to get on that plane." "No, you don't understand. God told me that I was going to this and to come here this time." And she said, "About that time, phone rang." And she answered it. She said, "You won't believe this, but somebody just canceled. So now you can go." goes, good. She goes, well, it'll be whatever, $120, whatever it was back. He goes, well, I don't have any money. And she was just, what? You just had a miracle happen, and you don't have any money? He said, no, God said he'd provide for it. And the neighbor that brought him asked him if he'd go in, and he did. He said, I can't stand this anymore. Here, take this Norland, and threw the money on the deal and gave him, paid his way to, you know. And that's the way it's hard for us to do. Hard for us to believe that way. But that's the way God wants us to believe. That God's going to do it. If he tells us he's going to do it, he's going to do it. Sometimes we may have to wait around for it and argue a little bit to see what's going on, but it's going to happen. I guess that's the end of this. They have some others. Well, that was kind of a short one tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Very good.
Appreciate everybody coming out. Get you home early again.